Welcome to the Red Chip Poker Podcast, where we share stories and strategies from the game's most fascinating minds. No matter where you are in your poker journey, there's always something new to learn. So let's get right into today's conversation with your host, Robbie Straczynski.
Hey everybody, Robbie Straczynski here for the Red Chip Poker Podcast. Welcome to our latest episode. Our guest today is Ross Glover. Ross is a part of the Red Chip Poker Las Vegas team, and he's writing a new Hold'em strategy book, which will be called Unbeatable Poker. Ross, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Robbie. Thanks.
Good. It's good to meet you. Good to hear your voice. We've been corresponding for a little while. Good to put a voice with the name.
Yeah, you as well. You as well.
Thanks. So, you've been interviewed a number of times in the past on different podcasts, different episodes, but I imagine that at least a few of our listeners are unfamiliar with your poker history. So how about you just sort of give us a brief recap of that?
Yeah, well, so I'm not a young gun at all. I started first back in the late 90s. I think my first casino poker game was in the late 90s. I played 7-card stud.
Ooh, old school, yeah.
That was totally old school. I mean, you literally couldn't find. So when I started, actually playing in a regular casino, which was in the early 2000s, you couldn't find a no limit Hold'em game. It was all limit, right? Because everybody was afraid that, all the money is going to go away, which maybe it would have, who knows. But so I started a little Indian reservation called the Akwesasne Reservation in Canada.
Wow.
I think the casino was on the New York side of the border, but it's right on the Canadian border.
And that's where you're originally from, that area?
I'm not. I lived up there. I was teaching sociology up there.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just started going to this casino. It was close enough, and learning how to play poker. And then I got into it was right at the cusp of online poker. So I started playing online a bit and realized, wow, this is very easy. And so for about 3.5, 4 years, I played online professionally. And then slowly started, the bots started creeping in. People started learning how to play. The competition wasn't as easy anymore. I wasn't, making $300 an hour or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something that doesn't involve me sitting in front of a computer 10 hours a day and get so frustrated. Because at some point it just started getting so frustrating and monotonous and uninteresting.
Were you aware? You're talking about the bots. Were you aware that these were bots and they were using different types of trackers and that sort of stuff?
I was. I mean, the story started creeping out a bit, and you could kind of tell. I mean, it wasn't a given, but I was starting to suspect something. I mean, when you see people or entities playing 12 tables, just this monotonous. I guess there are people who can actually do that, but and I guess some of us were. I mean, I was playing 8 tables at the time, so and maybe it wasn't 2 out of the question. But there were also hacks that got reported, and so it's you didn't know where you stood at that point, and everything was kind of up in the air, and I wasn't interested in in trying to discern it. And so I just moved on. I was like, okay, this is a phase of my life. It's cool. I was a professional poker player. I'll move on. And then, every now and then I would just hop on and, I need a few bucks. I'll just play poker, right? But, essentially I quit, and I was not really playing very much when Black Friday happened.
Right.
And I had become a web developer. So when 2015 rolled around, I was like, I'm going to go play in the World Series. I didn't necessarily want to play in the main event, but, I was like, okay, they have a Colossus. I can go play and see what this is about. How has poker changed? I was just curious. And so I went out and I started playing. I was like, oh yeah, I really love this game.
So one second, let me stop you there for 1 second though. All of those years you had never set foot back in a live casino?
No. I would go play occasionally.
Okay.
And, like I said, when I needed money, I would actually go play poker.
Okay. But, so in the brick and mortar realm. Gotcha.
Or I mean, but I just really, it wasn't a part of my game. I just didn't play very much, or it wasn't a part of my life. I was doing other things. I was living in Mexico for a while.
Sure.
it just wasn't part of my life. And then I came back in 2015 to play in the World Series. I mean, really just to play in Colossus and just like poke around and see what's going on in the poker universe, and realized, oh, wow, I really love this game. And I have no idea how this game is played any longer.
Wow. That's humbling.
It's totally humbling. I mean, I was sitting at a table, I've been playing live cash games for a couple of months, and I was sitting at some game, and this guy's like, hey, do you know who Ed Miller is? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, you should read one of his books. And I was like, okay. And so I went to the Gambler's Bookstore and said, oh, Ed Miller has a few books. Which one do I get? I'll take all of them.
Wow. You just sort of hit the books like, just like university or something.
I did. I took myself to poker grad school for sure.
Uh-huh.
And so, at some point I ended up with applications. And I was like, I mean, actually it was honestly Poker's 1% Ed Miller's Poker 1% that just blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. Like from a conceptual standpoint, I was like, oh my God, wow, this is so amazing. And then I moved to applications. I was like, oh, wow, this is really fascinating. I had no idea what I didn't know. Mm-hmm, and so I just spent, hundreds and hundreds of hours studying poker at that point.
So this was, I guess, exclusively, in the book, in the theoretical realm, or when did you decide to say, okay, hey, let's try to put this stuff into practice, basically, did you sort of stay away from the tables saying, oh my God, I don't know anything? Or did you say, with each new lesson, okay, let's see what we can implement here?
Well, the way it worked was I read the course and I started implementing everything in the course, and and watch my bankroll just sort of collapse. I was like, what is going on?
They didn't mention that
way
part
worse. Exactly. This was not a part of the book. And what I realized is eventually, I guess the trajectory is then I read Doug Hull's Poker Plays You Can Use.
Sure.
Which is like kind of here's how you apply all of this stuff that you've been thinking about. And I was like, okay, well then things sort of turned around a bit. Mm-hmm. And I started winning, but I realized at some point that I really don't know why, right? So when I read applications, I'm like, okay, I know that these things that I'm doing work, but I don't really know why. And so I'm looking at applications and trying to figure out, like, how is this stuff working? And from applications and Poker's 1%, I started putting together a strategy that would allow me to begin answering those questions for myself.
Right.
So like, what mistakes am I making when I go on these big downswings? Why am I going on these downswings? How do I analyze it? Because analyzing a single hand just wasn't doing it for me, because I have, this huge theoretical framework that I'm working from that says, well, in some senses, your individual hand doesn't really matter.
Right. Exactly. It's all about averages and ranges and stuff
frequencies.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I did is mostly from the framework laid out in Poker's 1%, I just went to Flopzilla and said, okay, let me just break down a range for a number of different flops frequency wise and see how this works, right?
You decided to do this on your own?
Yeah, I did that by hand, just to see like how would this look, and what combos would I be betting, what combos would I be checking, like how would I keep a 70% frequency on all these different flops. And I ended up working out, probably 15 or 20 different flops. And this is kind of how the book Unbeatable Poker, the Nitt 100 started emerging.
Interesting.
Is because I was doing this by hand.
Wow. So 1 second. So you were, I guess, this is exclusively cash games, exclusively Hold'em at the 1-2 stakes?
Yes. Well, 1-3, 1-2, 1-3. Yeah.
Wow.
At this juncture. Yeah.
So, and this is at what stage? This is a couple of years ago still?
Oh, this was within the first 6 months of
2015. Then. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so I was just like trying to figure the whole game out, right? Essentially.
And your complete focus was there. Clearly, I mean, you can't make this much progress in such a short amount of time if you're not laser focused on this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's what I started doing. I mean, it was a journey. Like there were like some weird things that there's actually one major thing that happened is I don't know that you get one, but I had a herniated disc the symptoms of a herniated disc emerged as this process, as my learning, like within the first 3 months of me being in Vegas, I realized that I couldn't sit anymore.
Ouch. Wow.
And so it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, this is just horrible. And, I thought I was talking about it as a poker injury for a while because it was like just a shooting pain down my arm.
Right.
And,
wow. An actual poker injury.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I was talking about it until I found out what it was. That kind of pain, you don't really sort of, for a while, you don't really think of it as anything serious or whatever. It's just like, oh, back pain or, I've been sitting up a lot or whatever. And so once I was bedridden, once I realized I couldn't actually move, then I started taking it seriously. Sure. But it was like so painful that I kind of bailed on most of my web development work just because I couldn't do it. Right. I'm like, okay, I can't do this. Like I handed it off to other people because I just couldn't sit in front of a computer anymore.
Right. But at the same time, you channeled all of your energies into the poker and the poker study.
Right. Well, I found a position where I could read. So I could type, but I could read. And so this is like
the importance of position in poker. Yes.
Exactly. So this is the real trajectory is I had like 6 weeks where I was just bedridden reading these poker books. Goodness. And then realized, oh, this is fascinating. Like I just became totally enamored by how to think about this game. Just completely absorbed me.
Right. So how long has this process, I mean, you mentioned the inspiration for the book. So how long would you say, and it's not 100% complete just yet, so from the beginning up until now, how long has that been? And I guess, let's start with that one first.
Okay. Well, to be clear, when this podcast is released, it will be finished.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, I mean, I have a full draft. It's just a few nitpicky things that have to be worked out. Okay. But I would say is it 2.5 years now?
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's been a lot of time.
It is a lot of time. I mean, I think in terms of the actual product, in terms of the thing that has actually emerged, is actually exactly a year.
Right.
Because I went through the process of trying to do this all myself, right? And then I was like, "What? Right. I have all of this done by hand," and I was working out and I was playing with it and it was working. And then I was kind of ambivalent. Do I want to turn this into a book? Do I not want to turn this into a book? Do I want to keep this myself? And then, I was talking to Doug Hull and another friend, and they were like, "Dude, you should just write it. I mean, it's interesting." If it gets out there and everybody starts deploying it, it's going to be 2 years before it really impacts anything anyway.
Sure.
Might as well, just go ahead and publish it and, get it out there because it's a really interesting idea and people might find it useful. And I realized at some point that it's true. If I had this when I started, it would have made mine much easier, right? I mean, just as laying a basis, a foundation for how to approach this game.
Okay, so I want to challenge you on that actually. So you're playing low limits basically. You're 1-3 and I guess you're 2-5 now, more or less.
Yep.
Okay, so you're playing those limits and you're saying that if you had a book like this, then wow, it would have done wonders for your game. I have to say though, I mean, high roller, and of course I mean this respectfully, but what makes you so confident that you have the experience necessary to write a book like this? Why should someone trust Ross Glover?
Oh well, that's a good question. So first of all, I can unload all of the information in this book onto other people. So I don't have to take full responsibility of it.
Okay.
No, so the subtitle of this book is called The Nitt 100.
Okay.
And the Nitt 100 is a very narrow range of exactly 100 combos. And it emerged from the advanced poker training website. They keep tabs on all of the, it's a simulation website. So they keep a record of all the hands that are played by all of their participants who play against, theoretical opponents, right? Or not theoretical, but kind of artificial intelligent opponents. In some sense, they're not fully AI, but
right.
But there was this range that, I was on the site and I was trying to, figure out how to do this thing being playing poker. And I was also on Red Chip at the time, right?
Sure.
So I'm like trying to put all these like different pieces together. And so they had this range that was, here is everything that all of our members are profiting. Here are all the combos that our members are profiting with in early position.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's interesting. So this means that, essentially everybody here is trying to learn how to play poker. So This is like a 1-2 game or a low limit mid stakes game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I now have a range that I know is profitable from ostensibly beginning players against the field.
Okay.
So let me start there.
Okay.
So that I can, assure both myself and the development of the strategy that I'm going to have range advantage across like a weak field. So that was the first step. And then that's what happened so I had worked out all these frequencies myself.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. Now I know what all the, if I was playing at, poker's 1% frequencies, I know what it would look like. Let me now take the Nitt 100 and put it up against what I think is a kind of competent, normal, maybe not competent, a normal range in a low mid stakes game, live game.
Got it. And well, that's certainly a very honest answer to that challenging question. Obviously, it makes sense at this point.
Well, then I put it through a solver. And this is where...
Well, yeah, check your answers, right?
Extremely interesting for me is how far off my manual breakdown of this range was.
No kidding.
Terms of what the solver produced. So I had it exactly at 70% frequency, right? And then like continuation frequency, whether check raising or betting or whatever. And the solver is just completely different. I was like, whoa, this is so amazing. There's such fascinating stuff when you're playing this, when you start looking at range versus range and how a solver wants you to continue with this, high range advantage situation, and some levels you think, well, this is kind of the perfect 70% range, but it's not. It's so contingent on certain other factors, board texture, what your opponent's range has that you don't have, like all kinds of interesting phenomena emerge out of this framework such that sometimes you're never betting and sometimes you're betting 100%. And it's really interesting on the fly.
Right. Sometimes, and I imagine you go into additional detail about this stuff in the book.
Yes. So the idea was that my idea when I started this project for myself was I would start with ace high flops and just work down to 9 high flops. And once I got to, sort of 9 high flops, I would have covered approximately 80% of all situations. That to me was a good starting point.
Right.
If you could play, close to quote unquote perfect poker, which I'm not claiming this is, but if you could play close to optimal poker 80% of the time, you'd pretty much crush the field at stakes, right?
I love it.
That was my initial approach. And so I just extended that to, applying this. And so I ran all of these flops through a solver, Card Runners EV, which now would be GTO Plus.
Right.
I've subsequently run it through GTO Plus as well. And then just broke down each of these flops into two-tone and rainbow flops so that how flush draws change the approach. And then I took all of the combinations and broke them into suit-based decisions. So instead of through a randomizer and sort of like trying to say, oh, well, sometimes this gets bet 67% of the time, so let me roll dice. I just said, well, let's break them into suits, and then you can begin thinking of how to continue based on the effect of suits. On some level on some level, or in some contexts, they actually have a not insignificant impact, right? I mean, sort of how you play ace king when you miss a flop, is actually fairly contingent upon what suits you hold.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's so those are some of the kinds of things that I discovered through this process, is like, how does a solver prefer its suit selection? And so, then that's what I did for all of these flops, and I just laid it out for anybody who wants to. They can go to each chapter and say, okay, well, on an ace high disconnected board, this is how I continue with this range.
Yeah, and I know that you have one of those, the Ace 7-2. That feels like that flop always comes out. You chose that as one of your examples.
That's the first one. That's the first flop in the book is Ace 7-2, because it happens so frequently.
I feel like every single time I'm playing, it's always Ace 7-2. Well, we're going to continue our interview with poker author Ross Glover, but first, it's time for a little strategy break.
Good morning. This is James Sweeney, aka Split Suit, co-founder of Red Chip Poker, and today I want to give you a little tip when it comes to 3-bet pots. If you play against tighter players or players who use very tight 3-betting ranges, this tip will be especially useful. Say your opponent 3-bets a range of queens plus and ace-king preflop. You call with whatever hand you deem playable, and the flop is 10-8-5 rainbow. If they continuation bet, should you give them action? While there are a number of variables surrounding this question, we can start by looking at how their range connects with this flop. Right away, we see they have an overpair 53% of the time, and whiffed over cards with their ace-king 47% of the time. That's right, almost half the time they've totally missed this board, even when using an extremely strong preflop 3-betting range. Now, this doesn't mean they're going to continuation bet with all, or even any of their busted ace-king hands, but one of two things is likely true. Either one, they're the kind of person to c-bet most of the time, and as such, will they be that excited about getting floated or even getting raised right this moment? Or two, they're the kind of person to c-bet less when they miss with ace-king, which means calling their 3-bets more often pre-flop to take advantage of their propensity to check fold on low to medium boards can actually make a lot of sense. Very few players who 3-bet with such a narrow range preflop are going to be especially good at balancing their postflop play, which can make your life much more profitable with both bluffs and monsters. If you're interested in exploring more of this, check out Core and pay special attention to level 2 lessons on giving 3-bets action preflop, and also the hit frequencies and floating lessons. You can get started on those lessons along with over 100 more for just $5 by going to redchippoker.com/core. That's C-O-R-E. Your bankroll and strategy will thank you. That's it for today's strategy segment. This has been James Split Suit Sweeney, and let's get you back to the episode.
Hey everybody, we are back with Ross Glover, author of Unbeatable Poker. Ross, so people, they take poker seriously these days, and those are our listeners here at Red Chip Poker. And of course, we've all heard of exploitative play. We've heard of GTO play. I'm wondering, though, at the lower limits, at the 1-2, 1-3, and at the 2-5, are those concepts relevant, or is it really only for higher stakes games?
Many people will say the only concept that's relevant at 1-2 is exploitative play. Mm-hmm. And so I contend that that's not true. So what I've seen over the last 3 years since I've been doing this are my fellow, or at least some of my fellow low and mid stakes players talk about how easy the game is. Like when I started, it's like, oh, it's easy. I just go in, I limp a little bit, and I raise, and I get a hand, and boom, everybody calls too much, and that's how I win. Mm-hmm. And, I've been doing it for 15 years, and it's just easy.
Yep.
And so I started reading this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I remember what happened in 2000 in online poker, where, or over that course of a couple of years between 2003 and 2005, where it just got much more difficult to beat the games. I said, this is going to happen for sure. You have someone like Ed Miller who's writing Poker's 1%, which is saying, look, this is how people are playing. This is going to filter down to 1-2 and 2-5 and 1-3, and the games are going to get harder.
Interesting.
And so within the last 6 months, most of those players that were telling me how easy it is to beat this game are like, oh my God, the game's got so much harder. What's going on? I don't understand. Wow. And I was like, guys, I was telling you this was going to happen. So, right? and it did. I mean, it really did. So like the the grinders that I know that are actually grinding for a living at 1-2 and 2-5 actually take this stuff very seriously and deploy these strategies. And so, or when I say these strategies, I mean, they understand optimal play and they're deploying optimal play, and they're doing it for a specific reason. I mean, one is it keeps you from being exploitable,
Right.
But by understanding optimal play, you can then begin to understand how and why you can exploit your opponents. And so, you can just say, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to play exploitative play. But how do you know what's exploitative if you don't even know what's optimal? And so my approach is to say, we now know what is optimal play. People coming to this game should start learning there. And then once you understand what is essentially unbeatable, then you can diverge from that to begin increasing your EV by exploiting the mistakes that other people are making. But how do you know what those mistakes are if you don't really know what a mistake-less play is?
Right. That is a very unique approach, not something I've ever heard anyone taking before. So it makes me wonder then, in your book, Unbeatable Poker, is it strictly GTO type stuff and optimal play that you're stressing and teaching, or do you also offer some exploitative or player specific types of tips and information?
Yeah. So the initial part, so 2 parts of the book, the flop and the turn, I give you what is essentially, solved play, like optimal play. And then the third section of the book are all the adjustments that I recommend that you apply after you've sort of gone through and sort of gotten the sense of what optimal play actually looks like, so that you can then say, okay, well, now I understand why I'm treating this player differently than that player, or why I'm treating this player's range differently than I would this other player's range, right? Because there are a lot of like nuances with optimal play that you've got to then apply. Okay, well, this player is just never going to have this range, and I know this, and because I know this, I can then exploit the range that they do have, or that I'm pretty sure they are going to have. Or I can say, I know now, since I've been watching this player for the last hour, where they're making all their mistakes. And so I will now, since I know that, and since I have a framework for understanding why I know that, I can then just start pounding them in those spots where I know they're making mistakes. And so, yeah, that's the third section of the book. But I really encourage people to sort of begin getting a sense of what optimal play looks like in order to really adjust, because you can't adjust from something that you don't even know what it is you're adjusting from, right? You have to have a default to adjust from.
Right. In a sense, that actually leads into my next question. This book, in a sense, like, again, I mentioned it's a very unique approach that you're taking. I've never heard of something like this before at this level of play. So, with that said, with that in mind, who would you say is the target audience that you're intending to reach?
Yeah, it's an interesting book. So I in the sense that it is in this in between space. Like I firmly believe that someone who has just come to the game, knows how to play it, etc., but has like not really studied at all, should be able to take this book, spend a month or 2 studying the book, and actually enter the game as a winning player. I believe that to be true.
Wow, that quickly?
I believe that to be true.
That's pretty good. Wow. That seems okay. I think I need to pick up a copy myself. That's pretty quick. That's worth it. Wow.
I mean, it takes study, right? I mean, it's a tedious process. I mean, I'm not claiming that it's fun or whatever. I mean, it's not designed to be, go out and raise everybody and they'll fold too much, right?
Of course.
It's not that kind of book. It's like lay the groundwork for becoming a top tier player. If you do that now, you'll always have it. Like the concepts of this book are basically, if you learn this book, you'll have it for the rest of your life. And from a mathematical standpoint, it's not beatable. You can't beat this.
That's the definition of GTO. That doesn't change. That's pure math. Exactly.
Exactly. And so that's why I think that a beginning player can approach it that way. But also anybody who is on the side of, I don't like that GTO stuff, I want to just play exploitative poker. also people some of my fellow grinders out there or attempted to be grinders have, so I've been trying this for 2 years and I can't win. I can't beat the game. I've really been trying. And they've been trying to exploit people in a way that they don't even know what they're doing, right? But they're told from a lot of different training sources that this is what you do. I mean, and the course is one of them, right? I don't want to critique the course because there's a lot of important stuff in the course, but one of the critiques of the course is that it's making assumptions about the population and about the player, the individual player who's the strategy in place that may or may not be true, but it doesn't give you the sort of the place to adjust from. And I think, the course is basically all like it's a global adjustment. Here's how you make adjustments, game types and different situations. And, that's great. And it's important to know, but at some point you need to know what you're adjusting from. And I'm suggesting that you're better off starting from getting all the defaults down and then moving to adjustments.
Sure. And everyone knows there's no Bible, so to speak, of, okay, you do it this way and it's always going to work. It's always valuable to take and learn from different sort of sources and different sorts of approaches. But the way you're presenting it, it really does seem to make sense. And, with just a couple months of, it's tedious, but a couple months of investment seems like it could really get you off to some solid footing here.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are lots of people, anybody that's not already a top tier player will find this interesting. And I suspect that some top tier players will be like, oh, I want to know, I've not run these numbers, and they'll probably not read the book, but they'll go to their own situation and run the numbers on their own solver, right? And see, oh, okay, this is interesting. Now I see why this is a valuable sort of framework.
Right. And beyond the book, and you're talking about running the numbers, there's also a software component. Is that right?
There is a software component. So, Doug Hull has helped me write software for this that basically you can go through and test yourself on every single flop and just, what action do you take here in this situation with this hand or this combo? What's your action? And you can go through the whole set of combos. You can go through a subset of the combo, the subset of the flops, or we're also working in. So one of the additional features of this, because of the Nitt 100 is exactly 100 combos, it allows you to do some work real time, right? So if for example, that, oh, this is a flop that I'm supposed to c-bet 34% of the time on, then it's like, oh, well, I have 100 combos. So once you figure out how to number the combos, how many combos are in a pair, right? How many combos are in ace king? Once you have those concepts down, you'll be able to say, oh, okay, so I can just c-bet ace king and queens plus here, and that'll be 36 combos. Boom, I'm done, right? I mean, so 30 combos or whatever it is. And so then you can actually have two ways to approach it. And that part of the quiz is like, okay, so how often do you c-bet this flop, right? What's the percentage on this flop? What's the check raise percentage? What's the check fold percentage, etc. And so you can train yourself to understand the geometry of the entire flop, right? So, okay, now I understand how this breaks down mathematically in percentages. I also understand which combos fall into the more aggressive lines, etc. And so that quiz program actually really helps you sort of integrate this into your game, and also gives you an idea of where you're making mistakes or where you're most likely to make mistakes.
In a sense, it sort of parallels the journey that you said you had to take methodology wise, but without having people having to work it out by hand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, essentially anybody could do this themselves, right? It's just I've curated the work and put it into a framework that will allow people to learn it fairly quickly. I mean, it's not easy. I'm not claiming it's easy, but it will allow you to do it fairly quickly. And the turn section, I mean, is probably the most tedious, but also the most fascinating, because you learn how to think about a brick in terms of your range instead of your hand, which is for me was like a monumental shift. It's like, think of bricks in terms of range And that's a different sort of framework from how I've been approaching thinking about a brick.
Yeah, absolutely. Next level thinking for any player who just sort of begins and does things on their own. Once they start thinking on that level of ranges, then it's like, okay, now you've progressed. You've beaten level 1. Now you're on level 2.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Well, talking about sections of the book, one of the sections, obviously, any good book has a good foreword, and your book, the foreword, was written by the very highly revered Tommy Angelo. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's interesting. So Tommy and I can't remember where we met for the first time. I think I went to see him talk at the Wednesday Poker Group in Vegas.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the WPDG, right?
Yes, that's the one. And he gave a great talk, and then we met afterwards, and he was already friends with Doug, and so we went out and just started talking poker. And it turns out, I was a meditator already, and and then I can't remember I don't remember if he had already written, maybe he had already written Painless Poker. I don't remember exactly, but whatever the case, we connected on the whole meditation level, and just became like kind of instant compatriots or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And so I worked with him on a new book that he's coming out with called Dailiness. Okay. So he would send me sort of drafts of that, and I would, give him my comments, because sort of have a tendency to suffer from depression a bit, and he doesn't have that impact, or he doesn't have that sort of whatever mental disorder or whatever you call it. Yeah. That dilemma doesn't confront him. So I was able to, respond to some of his grand optimism about people's ability to meditate every day with some, hey dude, sometimes you can't even get out of bed. Right. Slow down a little bit.
Sure.
And so through that, I was like, hey man, would you check out this book? And if you're interested, would you write a foreword for it? And he graciously said he would. And
pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's great. He's a great guy. Awesome. Amazing.
And another reason to go ahead and buy it. You said, by the time this podcast is released, the book is going to be out. And, naturally, the question is, as soon as The Godfather comes out, when's The Godfather Part 2? Maybe you have any plans beyond this book that are starting to formulate in your mind?
I do. So the subtitle of the book is The Nitt 100.
Sure.
And that obviously refers to the range. So the volume 2 is going to be the Cut Butt 306. So the idea is being that if you make it through volume 1 and 2, you will be able to play a complete game.
Wow.
Using only 2 ranges, right? But you'll have one range that's designed to be played out of position, one range that's designed to be played in position, and you'll have the framework for both of those ranges. And once you're done with that, you'll ostensibly be able to play a complete game, even though you've only had to learn the complexities of 2 ranges. And
wow. I love the way you present it, because, it sort of takes poker from being, oh man, I hope I can do the best I can and try to beat people, to this, finite thing that can be solved, that can be won if you're willing to go ahead and put in the work, and you know exactly how much work you're going to have to go ahead and put in. So very interesting way of framing it. Love it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Cool. Yeah, I know there are going to be some high level players that are, if they 2 + 2 will pan this for some reason. I know. Oh, this will never work. Somebody will work out the exploit against it. Well, yeah,
you have to have your devil's advocates, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, before we let you go, there is one more question I've got to ask you. Maybe it's unrelated, maybe it is related, but it boggles my mind. You have a story about killing Billy the Kid. Where does that come from? What does that mean?
Oh yeah. So, well, this is kind of my intro. This is my intro into poker, really. This is where I went, oh, okay. Honestly, this is my intro into the psychology of poker. So I, as I said before, I was playing when I first learned how to play. I was playing at Akwesasne, the Akwesasne Reservation.
Right.
And I loved gambling. I was definitely there was a time in my life where I would have considered myself close to a gambling addict. So anyway, I'm on at the end of a 30-hour session playing, 3-6 limit, still had no idea what I was doing. Like I had no idea. This is probably my first, my first 2 weeks playing the game, maybe 3 weeks. I had won my first ever tournament. I had done that, I remember, because I had a bankroll to actually play with. And that was why. And so I'm sitting playing heads up with this old dude who had a rolled up magazine. Like he was just like sort of playing with a rolled up magazine in his hand. I guess he would open it up every now and then to look at it, but we're heads up. So he didn't really have time to do anything. So he's just got this rolled up magazine in his hand. And retrospectively, it probably wasn't a terrible play heads up, but I didn't really know anything about what I was doing. So I raised pre-flop with king 5 offsuit. He called, and the flop came 5, 10, 10 or something like that. Mm-hmm. I bet, he raised, I re-raised, he called. The turn was a king. I bet, he raised, I re-raised, he re-raised.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember how. Oh no, I'm telling this right. It was 5, 5, 10 was the board.
Okay, yeah, it changes things for sure.
It was 5, 5, 10, and so king on the turn. He re-raises it. We cap it, right? I mean, well, I guess it was 6 bets because I don't think there was a cap, and then the river was a 5.
Oh goodness! Oh boy!
He bets. I raise. He re-raises. I 4 bet. He 5 bets. I 6 bet. He 7 bets. I don't know if we got it all in, but we came very close to getting it all in. I think finally he stopped raising and called. I turned over quads, and he flipped out. Like he slammed this magazine on the table, started screaming his head off. He was like a fairly heavyset guy. His face turns purple. It was like, oh man. Wow. And this is like first entree into, oh yeah, this game can really screw with your head.
Oh, sure.
So, he quit. He's like, I'm not playing this anymore. I can't do this. And, he cashed out. And if there was anything to cash out, I can't remember. And so that weekend was their weekly tournament or whatever they did. And so I went in to sign up for the tournament, and they come on and they say, so you all may know this guy, William McKinney or whatever his name was. I don't know what his actual name was, but we all knew him as Billy the Kid. Uh-huh. Was the guy playing against.
Okay.
We just want to take a moment of silence. He died.
Oh, goodness.
A couple months ago.
You actually killed him.
I actually killed Billy.
Oh, my God.
I bad beat the guy to death. I mean, I shouldn't be laughing. It's so horrible.
It's a horrible story, but wow, what a story to tell. My goodness. Well, we saved the best for last, and once again, that is Ross Glover.
Poker and make sure you meditate a little bit before you go play, y'all.
For sure. Well, if you don't want that to happen to you, I highly recommend you buy the book, Unbeatable Poker. I certainly think it's worth picking up a copy. If any of our listeners, Ross, wants to get in touch with you or has some further questions for you, how would they reach you?
You can reach me at ross@redchippoker.com. I'm on Twitter at theloser42. Good luck trying to spell that. And I think those are my primary presences. Also, unbeatable.poker is the website for the book.
Awesome. Sounds really good. Ross, pleasure meeting you. Great speaking with you, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
I look forward to it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. But don't stop learning now. Head over to redchippoker.com. You'll find everything you need to get better today. Join our free, friendly strategy group and to start talking poker with our coaches and community. And listen, if you're ready to take poker more seriously, sign up for Core, our $5 a week complete training platform built for players who have limited time to study. Core is packed with over 100 bite-sized lessons from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, quizzes, achievements, discussion threads, and more. And for the bravest of heart, we invite you to check out our pro membership, which includes 24/7 access to hundreds of videos, all of our playlists, all of our crash courses, and more. If If you want to see what the top 1% of players are studying to keep their edges razor sharp, visit redchippoker.com/Ruby. That's RUBY. And get a special deal on your first 3 weeks. Until next time, run good, play better, and get there.